All right, I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Page County School Board.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes.
Ms. Alger. Yes. Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon. All
Yes.
present.
Please pause for a minute of silence as we prepare for the meeting tonight. The Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Fox, do you have any agenda changes or additions?
I do not.
I have a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda as given.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Sullivan Smoot, a second by Ms. Alger to approve the agenda as presented.
Ms. Alger. Yes. Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we certify all personnel matters were discussed in closed session.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Sullivan Smoot, and a second by Dr. Painter to certify personnel matters discussed in closed session.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes.
Ms. Alger. Yes. Ms. Sullivan Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes. Do you have any citizens? I have a motion for consent agenda to include personnel in the January 2023 minutes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda with personnel action and minutes for January 2023.
A motion by Mrs. Sullivan Smoot and a second by Ms. Alger to approve the consent agenda.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes.
Ms. Alger. Yes. Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes. Ms. Seacrest, monthly financials.
Yes, good evening, board members. You all have been provided with the monthly financials for February, where the total expenditures and revenue were $3,311,130.81. Along with that, you have been provided with the local match calculation that we did balance with the treasurer's office. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you.
Make a motion that we approve the claims for
With
payment.
information.
Oh, it's information. I'm sorry.
Monthly financials. Dr. Johnson, Human Resources and Business Operations update.
Yes, good evening, members of the board. Tonight, we do not have a presentation per se on the screen, but we do have two topics that we'd like to just bring to your attention. I'll lead the first one, and then Mr. Bell's going to talk to you about the second one. The first topic is the lease for the Groveville property. And this is the time in which we evaluate the lease and extend it back out to the folks there leasing the school. The lease is actually effective September 1 for the upcoming 23-24 school year, but we'd like to get out in front of it with you all and with them. So since the inception of this lease with the private school that is using Groveville, they've been paying $3,000 a month to lease that property. And that has remained steady since day one. I've had conversation with Kevin Holcomb, who is their representative there, and we talked about the growing use. They're asking to use an extra classroom this year. They added 2 classrooms last year. We've looked at the monthly bills. I've got some data in front of me on electricity, heating, propane, and general costs to the school division. We just chose January as a typical month. So they're spending $3,000 a month for lease Growville currently. When I ran the numbers, we're probably spending slightly over that. It's difficult to say for sure because, for instance, the heating oil, we refill every couple of months. So it's hard to say they're spending this a month. But I took the most recent fill and divided it by 3. Electricity, we spent $17.58 in January, so that's a typical month's electricity use. So all that to say that it's my estimation that we're spending right at maybe slightly over $3,000 a month on oil and electricity. We maintain the building, so our folks go in and do basic maintenance. They do a wonderful job. They're very, very good tenants in regards to, if you do a walkthrough, you're going to see walls have been painted, the place is clean. They do a really nice job. They're good tenants. The building, I would say, is better off being used and sitting empty. And the other piece to the discussion is the water treatment facility. We still pay somebody to do all the testing and to oversight that. And going forward, the board and Dr. Fox and the planning team are going to need to really consider, there's going to be some major costs coming down the road to keep the water treatment plants legally current. But for this coming school year, they would like to reuse the building. We feel like it's a good use of the building. But I've talked with Mr. Holcomb about anticipating an increase in the lease. We talked about inflation and we talked about these numbers. He not surprised one bit and very comfortable. And so in speaking with Dr. Fox, we recommend, and you don't need to act on this tonight, this is just informational, but we would recommend a 10% increase, putting it at $3,300 a month going forward. That would cover our electricity and our heating. We haven't had any big maintenance there recently. We've done minor things. Maybe school will go in and fix a door, fix a faucet, and things like that. And they do some things themselves as well when they can. But in fairness, we just talked about what's fair, not to blindside a tenant with a massive increase. We thought 10% was fair given inflation and current costs. So unless you all want to direct us differently, I'll bring this back to you again in 2 months. That's where we're at with the lease currently. They've asked to add room 109, which is a small classroom, very close to where they've been operating. And they're anticipating us coming back with maybe 10% or somewhere in that range.
Do they use the kitchen?
So great question. I asked that question. They use the cafeteria. Since the pandemic, they carry food in. They don't cook there anymore. And actually, Ms. Jeffries is going to be meeting with them because there are a couple pieces of equipment that we could better use in other schools. And so I told them that today, actually. And Jenny's going to go and sit down with them and show them. There's a washer dryer unit just off of the loading dock that Jenny would like to relocate to another school. They're not using that. So we're going to do a kitchen inventory and maybe do some equipment as well.
I mean, I think we should at least break even.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But so my figures are 38 for oil and electricity. That was just a random sample month of January. So that's what, so I took the Dr. Fox was running a little bit behind probably.
Well, anytime they add a room or whatever, it should be automatic, right? Square footage. Should at least have a square foot rate. So I would look at the 10% plus whatever square foot rate they started at and where it's at today and see what the difference is. That would be my suggestion.
And I don't know how initially the 3,000 was settled on and decided as the rate.
I asked Mr. Bell, actually, was able to do some backstory on that, and I think you said Mr. Moran back then, and looked at our general bills and thought to be fair on what does it cost us a month, and just pass that on again.
You probably flipped the coin.
I remember him saying that. So, yeah, that would be my suggestion. The 10% seems reasonable, and then whatever square foot difference, just put a rate on it. What they added since it started.
I don't know, I haven't seen this room, but I think it's a very small room. I don't know what they've ever used for, it's basketball, well.
Well, I would agree with that. I don't think it should be above what it cost us. I don't think we should have to pay out anything extra.
And it's better to be used. There's no doubt about that.
I'd like to come back in 2 weeks and try to look at the square footage and just try to see what that looks like. Maybe it's close. The second thing, Mr. Bell is going to walk you all through, if you remember, we put out an RFP for solar panels on the roof of the technical center, and we have all of that information, and we looked at the bids, and it's going to walk you all through that.
Good evening, board members. Tonight, as Dr. Johnson said, we wanted to give you a brief overview on the status of the solar power services proposal for the tech center. As he said, at your November meeting, you gave us the go-ahead to issue the RFP in December. Timmy Williams and I, and Dr. Johnson was there as well. We met with 3 companies at the tech center, reviewed the RFP, and answered their questions during a walk around on the campus. In the second part of January, we got 2 proposals back. We did not get a proposal back from the third company. The end result of the process, before we get into some of the details that you see there, the end result of the process is to hopefully identify a company that's going to install solar paneling on the roof of the main building at the tech center, and in turn supply solar power to that building, with the intent hopefully to generate some financial savings to the school division over the term of the contract, but also to provide educational learning experiences for our students at the tech center. There's no cost in this type of arrangement. There's no cost to the school division for the installation, the maintenance, upgrades, replacements of any components that go bad. And at the end of the term, there's no cost to remove the components. There's no cost to us. The contractor takes care of all that. In exchange for them doing that, we're paying a rate for the electricity that's generated by those panels. The intent, of course, is that that's going to be at a cheaper rate than what the power company charges us. We want to make sure that we're looking at this financially, operationally, and instructionally, because there's a lot of components as part of this. If you look at that sheet, you're comparing those two, you're looking at a lot of pieces of information, and that really is a summary of key information out of the RFPs. We're rating the proposals on the company's demonstrated ability to comprehensively perform all of the services that are detailed in the RFP, the approach and methodology that they employ in performing these solar PPA services, and PPA stands for Power Purchase Agreement. We're also looking at the overall qualifications and capacity of the firm to perform the services required, the proposed schedule for doing this. Since we're dealing with an academic environment, that's important. And then finally, even though finally what we're doing is we're looking at the learning opportunities for students, because this isn't just about putting the panels up, but what are the implications for our students going forward with this opportunity as well. So we're in the process now of looking at everything. What we wanted to do is provide you with some key details from both proposals tonight, so you have a chance to look this over. If you have any questions, come back to us and say, well, why is this versus this? What are they asking for here? What are they talking about here? This gives you a little bit of opportunity to look at that and reflect on it, and then come back and say, okay, we've got some questions related to this. Like I say, we're still in the process. We've got some more stakeholders that we want to work with and make sure that this is a good thing to go forward with. Basically, what we're doing is we're not asking for any action tonight. This is informational. We want to get this information out to you all so you have a chance to really look at it. When we come back, after taking this really methodical approach, when we come back with with a recommendation, this just has a chance for you to have this additional information beforehand, so you're not just getting it one night and then having to make a decision just over the course of that meeting. So it's a long-term commitment. We're talking about multi-decades, 30 years typically for these plans. So this is not something we want to just have the school system commit to, even though we're talking about a roof on a building on a campus. This is still not something that we want to enter into lightly. And I thought that having this information for you now, giving you an update as to where we stand, I think would be very beneficial. We're not prepared to really answer a lot of detailed questions tonight, but if anybody has any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
I have.
Go ahead.
Are there any school systems within a 50 to 100-mile radius that they have done any solar using either one of these companies?
That these companies have, not that I'm aware
And Powell is preparing to work with Broadway on, actually, they've got a historical site over there that they landed. And they are also engaged in discussions with Shenandoah University.
Where are they out of, do you know? Is it, yeah,
In Power is out of Alabama, Cherry Street is out of Georgia.
okay.
If I can add to the discussion, if you look at the middle of the sheet, the large box, when we put the RFP out, one of the things we asked for was we wanted an educational component. You know, we weren't so much interested in oh, can we just pop solar on one of our buildings? We don't want to lose sight that we're in the business of education. And so we were very clear on that when we met with these folks, when we put it down. And when Mr. Bell and Mr. Williams and I went through the proposals, I really wanted tonight to point out one of these companies took that very seriously. And you can see on the left there in the middle of your sheet, they're going to provide a training program for our students in how this process is going to work, how this equipment is going to be mounted, how it's going to function. They're going to offer jobs to up to 5 of our students to participate in this. They're going to create a solar textbook for us that we will earn. They're going to provide opportunity for our students to actually get credentialed in the industry. And so I actually went back to them after we went through this, talking to Dr. Fox about how you compare a really deep educational piece when you notice the financial reward is not comparable against the company that's given the financial reward, but not so much the educational piece. So I went back to them and asked them to put a dollar amount to the training. So you can see Mr. Bell put there, put a value there at the bottom up to $45,000. We calculated how much money the students would be paid when they have an opportunity to work on this job. We calculated the value of the textbook. We calculated the value of having an instructor or our electricity teachers learning this trade to be able to share. We don't lose sight that we own these things, and so even when they've gone, we're going to have a solar textbook. We're going to have staff that understand it, and it could be, speaking with Mrs. Pett today about this, this could be something that we could build in going forward to Electricity 2, a unit on solar energy and installation and so on. We were a little bit disappointed on the right side. It was very much more generic. We're going to get you a screen. We're going to let you see, you know, how much savings. You see those when you go into green schools and green buildings. But we were looking more for a much deeper dive for our students in this at the technical center. When we calculated the amounts, at first glance on the right side, you can see 52,200. That's over 30 years. And so that's about a little over $100 a month. And so we were weighing, is that worth it? As opposed to the long-term gain of a student that walks out of this with a certificate and the potential to get hired in the solar field. I think that ripple effect, to me, is very valuable, more so than $100 a month in the school budget.
There you got it.
I was going to ask a question about that, but this is a one-time
deal of 3 weeks and 15 students that were lucky enough to do it at that time, right?
It is.
When this is like a 30-year thing,
So what they're hoping, both.
in
these
30 years,
companies-
you're going to be retired. You're not going to care.
No, so what they're hoping, both of these companies, and we actually had another company reach out who didn't bid, but said, hey, I didn't bid because this job was too small, but we're hoping you'll, and I said to Ms. Bell, all of this is about people trying to get their foot in the door, and they're hoping that if this goes well, that there'll be other physical plants in Page County that we will put panels on the roofs. And so whether that happens or not, my thoughts are if it does happen, we've got students ready to go and a chance, to grow employees in Page County. And if it doesn't, we've equipped our kids with an experience they wouldn't have. So.
And I think, Dr. Painter, to add to that too, the goal is to, with the textbook and all of that, to look and see how we add a solar component to the current curriculum so that our kids that continue to go through the program get that piece and then could potentially sit for that exam as well. So they might be able to get their regular electricity, but maybe also get a certification for solar.
That's what we talked about. Ms. Pettit was talking about, we've got this big group, now that we added a second electricity teacher, we've got 2 classrooms of electricity 1 this year. Which means next year, we're gonna have 2 classrooms of electricity 2. So she felt as though that's gonna be a prime opportunity to, whatever long the unit might be on solar energy from a practical electrician's point of view.
So I guess what I'm sitting here wondering is what do these companies get out of this? Because I hear y'all right that we don't pay for anything.
We don't pay for anything in terms of the installation, but we are paying our electric bill derived from solar to them.
They're getting a cut of the electricity bill, well after stuff out of pocket.
Also, what happens? Okay, so if this is a 30-year contract, right?
30 years.
Let's say in 15 years, the tech center needs a new roof. Who pays to take these things off to fix the roof and then to put them back on?
That's
Yeah, I don't like that.
Mr. Gruber?
And my point to add to that would be, the technology is going to change in 20 years. So
It is for 30.
20-year contract, maybe all looked at that too.
I don't know if
So this is
20.
30.
20 is an option with one of the, 20 is an option with one of the.
It might make more
companies.
sense from a standpoint of obsoleteness.
But Dr. Payne, to come back to your comment, Dr. Payne, they addressed that with us and they said, before you mount, they bring an engineer in as well to ensure that you don't put this equipment on a roof that's going to need to pull it down the next number of years. That's a worry for them as well. Well,
So how is the tech center roof?
it's strong. It's a metal roof, and Timmy Williams has been up there. They went up and inspected it with Mr. Williams when they were here.
What
I like
about
this project.
what about the equipment if it is is there anything in there about upgrading equipment?
Yes, yes. When things go bad or the technology changes, part of the agreement is that they go in and they upgrade it.
They do all maintenance on it.
All right.
Yeah.
So what does it cost when it says when your 30 years is up, option to purchase equipment at fair market value?
Basically, we can buy the equipment from them and then it's ours and we don't
And
deal with
obsolete.
them,
Or we can say take it.
possibly.
Yeah, the timeline seems long to me.
does.
though. 25 or 20 years might be better for us.
Yeah, and 30 is pretty much the industry
that the
standard
industry
right now
standard? Copy that.
for solar, on small scale.
Okay,
solar.
for this sort of range.
Yeah.
Got it.
And isn't it after that time frame is up, the electric company buys the solar power?
If we stay with that and
Right.
we keep the equipment and it's ours, then we're either generating our own power or we're selling the excess to the power company.
We
I
have
understand.
solar panels at our farm, they're on the ground. But our solar bill, our electric bill is about $8 a month. Of course, it's not a big situation like a schoolhouse. It's more in the summer because of the pool and everything. But the bottom line is, we were having a situation, we called, they were on it like that, and there was no problem and there was no charge. So, there's going to be, who knows what'll come out down the road. But after that year, that 30-year or 20-year, whatever the contract is, then that power gets sold to the electric company and you benefit from that. But again, I know from now to then, but we've been pleased. We've had it for 13 years now.
I think for us, next steps were bringing to you informationally. We still need to schedule a meeting with 2 electricity teachers. I've had discussions with the edit on this. I've got that meeting set, so that meeting's going to occur before the next time we're in front of you. Really just making sure that you are interested in whether the educational side or more the straight financial side. I don't want to drag the electricity teachers through too much if we're not really thinking that direction.
You want to know what we're interested in as far as the educational side of it?
Well, if there's any big red flags that you say, don't go there or don't go,
I think there's merit for both.
yeah. We'll come back with our best proposal.
If we could bring, trade students, to even bring entrepreneurs, to the community, and they start a business doing this and help the community. I mean, that always sounds better to me, but,
You bring it back in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Dr. Fox, proposed budget?
Yeah, so, good evening, everybody. And while Mr. Samples gets me set up and I get going, I just want to say tonight, to you guys, our students, I'm sorry you're going to have to go through a really long budget presentation tonight as your first budget. So Mrs. Seacrest put you together a survival kit in case you get desperate. But don't freak out. It's all good. And I also just want to let you know, I have told our staff, I want them to interrupt me if there's a point that needs to be clarified or I'm not making the point clearly enough, or if there's other information, I've told them freely I would like for them to interject. So don't be alarmed if they do, because I've let them know I would really appreciate them doing that. I didn't want anybody to say, oh my God, they interrupted the superintendent. I want them to interrupt me if I'm making a mistake or something isn't clear. So again, just starting tonight with our mission and vision statement, because we always start there whenever we're talking about where we want to go, and especially with such a topic as budget, we want to remind ourselves of our mission and vision, which hopefully in the next few weeks will be different and new for our strategic plan. But just reminding you of that. These are the different factors. We talk about these every year in terms of things that impact our budget. Our students' needs obviously come first, and you're going to see a lot of that tonight because this budget is centered around student and teacher needs. We are dealing with enrollment fluctuations again. Allocations from our various funding sources are federal, state, and local. You'll get an explanation of where we are with state in just a minute. Different state mandates, there's definitely a number of them out there right now that are creating some uncertainty for us. Our annual health insurance renewal, which we'll talk about, there's always those rising expenses of costs for contracts or services and operating expenses. We're seeing that this year, and that's not going to go down. That's going to continue to go up. Compensation adjustments is a huge piece of what we're going to talk about tonight. Our ESSER 3, 2, all of that funding is on the downward swing now. We have about a year and a few months left in all of that funding, so that will soon be taken away and not available to us for some things, and we'll talk about that tonight with regard to some staff positions. We're still seeing some of the impacts of COVID-19, lack of substitutes, and having to pay teachers to cover classes is one of those impacts. Capital improvement projects, we'll talk about those just briefly in terms of some requests we're going to potentially make to the Board of Supervisors if you all are in agreement. And then, gosh, those unfunded mandates. And I would say right now they're unfunded and uncertain. We don't know what percentage or portion is going to come back to bear on the locality versus what the state's going to contribute. And just always reminding us of our why, as this is complex and it gets touchy at times because everything matters and we have to make decisions, and that doesn't feel good. But if we remind ourselves all the time that these smiling faces are the reasons that we do it, it brings us back to our center and what we're doing. This is another challenging budget year. I think Ms. Seacrest and I were hoping that the second year of the biennium would be a breeze. I think it's worse than last year, to be honest, because at least last year we felt a little more confident in some of the numbers. Tonight, we're very uncertain about the numbers we're presenting. And just due to some of the budget delays that we've seen at the state level, Our budget does not include any of the Senate or House budget proposed amendments. I have one spot in there where we've put it, but they're just up in the air too from the original numbers that we shared with you. There is about $1 billion difference right now between those two houses that they've got to overcome in the next couple of weeks, hopefully sooner rather than later. For us, our process is tonight, we propose this. This is the superintendent's proposed budget. And it's just that, it's just a proposal. It's going to change. There's no question about that. The next step for you all is that you would then approve the budget. That will change as well this year. And then the final step will be that you adopt it. And I would venture to say it's likely that there's going to be some amendments or revisions once you adopt it, just because of the timeline of all of this and where the state is. I think a piece we've got to keep in mind, we talked about this last year, is the longer the budget process goes on, the less time we have to prepare and get out contracts. And we talked about this pretty extensively. We don't want to delay contracts because it makes people feel very uneasy, and we don't need to be losing anybody because they don't have a piece of paper that says you have a job. So that is a primary thing for us, that even if we can nail down that compensation piece and be comfortable with that, we can issue contracts. And then I think it's important to note that the state superintendent did resign last week of public education. And that has created, again, it's just another piece to this, because she's our advocate for the General Assembly and all of this, and the liaison in that communication. So that just adds another layer to that process of where we are in terms of all of this. So at the state level, we've talked about this before. I'm going to move very fast through some of this because it's repeat information for you all. You know that there was that state calculation tool error that impacted this fiscal year and next fiscal year. Right now, what we know is that they have held us harmless for FY23 for this school year. We don't know where that's going to land for next year. The hope is, I think everybody's feeling optimistic that they'll cover that difference, but they haven't officially said they will. So that could be a gap, another gap that we then have to fill at the local level. In terms of the General Assembly, this is again, the second year of their biennial budget. This budget that you're going to see tonight is based on the governor's amended budget that he proposed back in December of 2022. So the session ended on February 25th. They did pass what they call a skinny budget. It's just enough, I think, to get them through to the next step. That is a little bit different than last year. They didn't have a skinny budget. We're not exactly sure of everything that's in the skinny budget, but we've been told there's a skinny budget. And so a special session is going to have to be called as far as I know, as of right now, that date has not been confirmed that it's been called yet. And again, there is this $1 billion discrepancy that they have to figure out. It's a lot of money. And education is a piece of that $1 billion. So in terms of what we do sort of know, this is, again, repeat information for you, but these are things that impact our budget, and we don't know whether they're going to be locally funded or funded from the state. That hold harmless for the calculation error. There is that increase in teacher salaries, and this is a critical piece because you're going to see this mapped out for you throughout the budget where we have the 5 versus the 7. So they increased the budget over the biennium from a 10% raise to a 12% raise. So it's an additional 2% that has to be covered. And then they told us that even if you went over 5% last year, you don't get credit for that. So if you guys recall, last year we did a 7% raise. That extra 2% doesn't count towards this year's 12%. So you're going to see we have it mapped out if that holds true. And if they pull back on that and say we can get credit, you'll see that mapped out. Reading specialists in grades 6 through 8. That's great news, wonderful news, but how is it going to be paid for? Is it the locality or the state? Expanding those support positions to 4 per 1,000. Those are things like your social worker, your school psychs, your, Paul, help me out, so school counselors, psychologists, social workers, behavior support specialists, those folks. Instructional aides, assistants, increasing that ratio to 1 to 20 in underperforming schools. That's a massive, massive number. And again, don't know whether that's partially funded, fully funded at the state, locality, what. Fully lifting the support cap will bring us revenue. That's a good thing. That's going to bring us some extra money. And then the retention bonus. Last year it was called the pandemic bonus. This year it's being called the retention bonus. Last year we got state funding for about half of that. and then the locality paid the other half. We don't know if that's going to be paid fully from the state or from the locality split for an in-kind with that. Our budget that we do every year is based on ADM and enrollment. So this is not new news, but you've seen K-12 enrollment changes from 2010 to 2019. A lot of decrease and decline. You're seeing, especially in rural and smaller areas, you're seeing the decline. For us, over the last 9-10 years, we've seen about a 5 to 10% decrease. So the areas that are in green are where they're seeing the most increase, and it's in some of your bigger cities and areas like that. This is enrollment and population. Mr. Gilbert, you had asked us to maybe superimpose these. So this just shows you our trend in enrollment has been going down. That's not new news to you. That's just been an unfortunate part. But you can sort of see where it kind of aligns at some points with the population of Page County. So that blue line that's in the back shows the population for Page County. So you can see a little bit of a decrease in population. It was a corresponding decrease in school enrollment. This is an interesting statistic, and this is not isolated to Page County. This is across the state, across the nation, where you've seen an increase in the number of families that choose to go homeschool. COVID did exacerbate that, but you can see where we're down about 200 students who are now participating in homeschool. And that, again, that trend of just kind of exponentially increasing is not unique to Page County. So ADM, that's the number, the average daily membership that we use. That number is what the state used to fund us. So we have to, they give us a recommended number, and then we have the option to either increase or decrease that number each year based on what we think. We look at enrollment trends, you look at birth rates, you look at kindergarten, how many kids are coming in. So that's the number that we're going to be using. And you can look, this is just a quick table that shows you if you take every grade where they are right now and you bump them up to the next grade, keep kindergarten the same, the number of births for this year's kindergarten and the incoming class of kindergarten are actually the same in Page County. So we left the kindergarten numbers the same, but you can see that if you bump those up, seniors graduate, we're down about 47 students for this coming school year. So ADM is without pre-K. So if you look at that number, it's about an average right now, 2877. So that's, again, if everybody stays, nobody leaves, some go in, some come out, 2877 is where we would land. What we've chosen to do, and I told you guys this last year, I wanted to be conservative, and we're doing it again this year. We can't afford to be over and not have, we have to return money. We can't do that. So while we may be sitting at 2877 today, we're going to go a little bit conservative and go with 2850. And that's right in the sort of in the middle of where the state projected us. So we feel comfortable with that number. So what you see tonight is based on that average projection of 2850. Okay. All right. So in terms of priorities, where are we going and where are we heading? Always sort of have listed for you, but compensation in order to be able to attract and retain staff continues to be a priority for us. And it really isn't a negotiable this year with the state stating that you have to get to the 12%. This is a non-negotiable. We have to do this. Now, whether we exceed that, that's an option. We're not presenting to you tonight anything that would exceed that 12%. So that includes salary increases for all and a step. And I've talked with you guys before about the importance of keeping that step. And then some classified scale adjustments in year 2 of that process that we're going to do. In terms of trying to meet the academic, social, and emotional needs of students and just funding extra positions that are currently grant funded, we've got to add some extra staff positions in there. We're going to lay those out for you. There's always going to be additional facility upgrades, renovations, and expansions that are needed. And then some capital improvements. We have just a little bit of information on that tonight. We're focusing more on the staff and the compensation tonight. So I'm not going to read this. This is the same information from before about that jump to the 12% and then not getting credit for the 7% that we did last year. So just know that those unexpected costs are, you're going to see what that impact is in just a minute. So in terms of looking at this, the way we've outlined it for you is with those 2 scenarios. So option A includes the additional 2% that we're required to go from 10 to 12, and it gives you no credit for last year. So in a sense, we'd have to get to 7%. 6% raise and a step will get us to that 7%, but it's going to come at a cost of $2 million. The other option is if they do give us credit, we can get to that 4% and they'll cost us $1.1 million. So as we move through this, you'll see the line for compensation is going to have those two scenarios there. So we don't know yet which one of those two we're going to have to go with, but either one's going to cost us significantly. It's a lot of money, but it is moving teacher salaries and staff salaries. In terms of the classified scale adjustments, if you guys recall last year, we did a lot of work. We unbanded those steps so that, might have been at year 3, 4, and 5, you didn't have a raise each year. We did that. There's now a consistent percentage step in between each of those scales for all of the classified scales. And then we had to make those mandatory adjustments to get to the minimum wage increase. The next minimum wage increase is not until 2025, is that right? Yes, ma'am. 2025, where it goes to 13, and then the last jump will be to 15. So we have not put anything in right now to adjust minimum wage other than the increases for salary and the other adjustment that we've made to the classified scale. So that was year 1. Year 2 this year in that process was to add additional compensation equally at each step in each scale. So not only will they get the raise, whether it's that 6 in a step or the 3 in the step, we've also added some additional money to each step to increase that, to make us more competitive. Because these are our positions like our bus drivers, our custodians, our secretaries, some of our financial. So we're hoping that will bring us up a little bit in terms of being more competitive. Next year, we look at some other things with that scale in terms of looking at, is there something that we can do for our people who have been here longer and had more service with us? Right now, everything is scaled equally. So in terms of costs for that, when you look at these classified scales adjustments, so this is not the raise piece, this is the adjustments to each scale. So adding money to each step. For your clerical workers, that's your clerks in your buildings, your secretaries, your bookkeepers, it's going to cost about $45,000. For your classified, which is a bigger, most of your folks, your specialists, your attendants, your instructional assistants, custodians, maintenance, mechanics, going to cost about $130,000. And then for your transportation staff, and that's your drivers of buses, with CDL and some of our car and van drivers, as well as our assistants, it's going to be about $33,000. So to add that money to each of those steps for all of those employees, you're looking at $208,000. So in addition to your 6%, so that's your option 1, your 6% in your step, you put those classified adjustments in there, you're looking at a compensation total of about $2.2 million. And then for option 2, the 3% in the step, you're looking at about $1.3 million.
So the funding, I think last year was the teachers, SOU teachers, right? Is that this 1.177, that includes all teachers?
These are not teacher scales. These are you're talking about for the raise and the step? Yes, that would be for
Every teacher. Okay.
every staff.
Every employee. in
Every
Page
employee.
County.
Yeah.
Teacher, custodian, bus driver,
Then that second line there, that classified, that's just for that
just
group of
for those
employees.
classified.
So there's 2 adjustments that they would get this year. That's the raise and then this other additional adjustment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we might be putting 2.2 million, or we might be putting 1.3 million. We'll see with that. And again, that part of that is we don't know yet how much of the state is going to fund, because they're talking about, maybe that extra 2%, they might fund that fully. We'll see. We don't know. That would be great because it's going to bring down that total. We can use that money for some other things. All right. So staffing needs. I think, we've had a lot of conversations this year. It came up in our winter retreat that we had, our winter meeting, about some of the needs. Not only are we seeing the mental health needs in students, we're seeing the behavioral needs. We're seeing we need some expanded options for kids in terms of what do we do if a kid needs some additional supports. And so this is primarily focused around that in terms of what are some positions at the school level that we can put into play that will help with some of that. So that's primarily how this is laid out for you all tonight in terms of that. So in terms of student support and monitoring, Our high schools and middle schools currently have an in-school suspension. It's an instructional aide who monitors that room. It's used as a way to keep kids in school. They get their instruction, but they're not out with everybody, so they lose a little bit of that fun part of being with their peers. We need to add that to our elementary schools. I don't particularly like the term in-school suspension at the elementary level, but it's a way to classify it that makes sense. You'll hear it sometimes referred to as a timeout room. This would be an option if a child's misbehaving. There would be a place that the teacher could immediately send that child that's supervised, and then there's some structured things in that room for that child to do, whether they might need to do some zones of regulation and get themselves calmed down, or whether that child may need to spend all day because they didn't behave appropriately, and that needs to be the consequence for that. We would need to do that 4 full-time instructional aides, and that would come at a cost of $127,000. And that
They
cost,
deserve that much per person.
say again? Yeah, to cover that room, yeah. And that costs, correct me if I'm wrong, is salary and benefits for 4. So all the numbers we're presenting are salary plus benefits. Cafeteria monitors, this is just another one just to provide another level of support at the schools right now. Cafeterias are being covered either by teachers or instructional aides or administrators or other staff in the building, like your Title I teacher or your instructional coach, to provide that supervision and assistance in the cafeteria. If we could put monitors in there, we could free those people back up to go and do instructional. Instructional aides could go back into classrooms. Teachers could have an unencumbered lunch. But and we kind of talk with principals, give us, what would be the magnificent number that you would want? What could you live with? What we've proposed here is a middle of the road where each school would get 2 cafeteria monitors. And this is just part-time pay for a middle of the day block for 2 to 3 hours. And then it's hourly pay, 1 at Springfield. So you're looking at a total of, what is that? 17, 16. It's hard math. But that is an hourly, it's no benefits attached to that. That's just part-time pay. In the past, that's been a great position sometimes for our bus drivers. They'll do their morning route and then they go into a school and they do their cafeteria and then they jump right back on their bus. And they have another way to make some income. So that's on here as a proposal for you to consider just providing some extra support.
Can I interrupt just real quick? Just as Dr. Fox was saying that all of these positions are the salary and the benefits, if they are a new position, for example, the timeout room in school suspension position that we don't currently have in the budget, those are projected at the 6% rate because that number is not currently in our budget. So the raise number is only the positions that we currently have. So those positions, all new positions are estimated at the 6% plus the benefits, just so you all are aware of that.
All right, so I'm giving you lots of options tonight and consideration, so stay with me. Another option A here. So this is a position that came up in conversations at our winter meeting. If you guys recall, there was a lot of conversation about the role of the assistant principal and some of the work that they're doing and how truly stretched thin they are in addition to our principals. So this proposal is coming from that conversation to be able to provide some school level assistance. And I'm giving you 2 options. One is a little bit more budget friendly. The other offers probably a little bit more support in terms of what the person can do. So option A, and you're going to see this carried through the remainder of the presentation. Option A would be for an administrative intern or teacher in residence position. And this would be a teacher on a 10-month contract who has an administrative endorsement or is working towards getting an administrative endorsement. So it would be like a quasi-administrative position, adding support at that level, but also giving other support across the school. So they would manage all of the attendance and the truancy that currently falls on the assistant principal. They would handle all of the testing. Again, that falls on the assistant principal right now. They would be able, because they have the endorsement or are working towards getting their admin endorsement, they could handle some of the lower level discipline stuff. They would manage the Section 504 plans that are in the school. That's going to give them that great special ed experience. They're going to provide some front office support because part of this was also to be able to have a time when there'd be a designated person to go cover the front office when the main office clerk needed to take lunch. Right now, that's being covered by other people in the building. They could also serve as the pre-referral coordinator. So that's when a parent or a teacher says, I think my child might need some special assistants, you go through the pre-referral process. They could manage that. Right now, it's being paid through a stipend, right, not a supplement, a stipend, to a teacher in the building who's doing that as an extra part of their job.
Student study.
Yeah, student study. Mhm. And then at the middle school level, because our assistant principals also handle the athletic director duties, that would fall under this person. And what it does is that gives that person a really broad experience. If they want to become an assistant principal or principal, they get to do some of that work and decide, is this really what I want to do? And they get that experience before they might jump into the APC.
So if they were working on like their admin intern hours that they need, would they have if we went with this, would they have an option then to flip flop with one of the other ones? Because they have to have it at different levels.
Yeah, I think we could work and be creative and support that. Because you'd have to make sure, because we want them to get that endorsement. Ultimately, we want them
You have
endorsed.
to do elementary, secondary, and division.
So we're proposing one of those for each school in support, and just giving another person again at that central school level to help. But that's going to come at a cost of $621,000. So that is not cheap. I think the plus to this is it frees up your principals and your assistant principals to do more of that instructional work. And we need them doing that work. We don't need them necessarily tied up with some of these other things. So the other option, which is a little more budget friendly, would be an attendance clerk. Attendance is a huge thing for us. You know, we're dealing with chronic absenteeism. It is a place we're revamping everything that we're doing, but we need somebody at the school where that is part of or is their sole responsibility. And so this option would be putting an attendance clerk at each school. So it would be a 10-month secretary position. Obviously, you're not paying the teacher wage for that, so it comes in at $285,000. It's still going to provide you with a little bit more instructional time because it takes it off the AP's plate. It would also give you a second body in your front office, right? Because they would be housed in there. That was one of the things a couple years ago in the budget when they had to find stuff that they took away. And it is important. I think it's really needed. Both ways of this are valuable to our schools. I think those current secretaries and bookkeepers in those offices would tell you this is as critically important as, say, an admin intern would be.
Some years ago, the all four elementaries had, we called it a bookkeeper and a secretary, and so there was strength in numbers to cover the office.
Yeah.
That was a budget cut.
Yeah. Because right now, if the front office secretary is out, we can't find a substitute, you patch that and piecemeal that. You know, your hope would be you had this person potentially to do that, or even your admin intern could help with that. Any questions about those two different scenarios? All right, in terms of other positions that we need, we're just going to keep going through some needs. So this is in the area of special education. This is really also another non-negotiable. You're going to see it later on. I've listed it as essential. We are bursting at the seams with our early childhood special education population. So we critically need another teacher. And in order to run that classroom, you have to have an aide by state code. So we're going to put in there for another teacher at that level and an aide at that. One of the other things that we really need in terms of special education is what we call a behavior support program. And that's a program that's specialized to help students who need to work through things that are behavior related. So this might be for your emotionally, thank you. Holy cow. Emotionally disabled students, thank you. Mostly for them. And so it's a program, it's not a one where a kid may spend the rest of their school career. The goal is you get them in there, you work specifically on behaviors, and then you put them back out into the classroom slowly. And we've seen success in other divisions with this kind of program. Right now, we don't have that. We have specialized programs for students, but we don't have one that's specific to ED students. So we're putting that in as a potential. It gives us another option for kids. So you add in this idea of an ISS room at the elementary level. You've got that option at every school, and you put this behavior support program in. Now you have another option for some of our special needs kids. And the other option that we need desperately is expansion of our alternative ed program. Sadly, we have to put this in there. It's not something we want to do, but we do need this option locally because right now we don't have a place for some of these kids to go when they do need a period of time outside of the school setting where, again, we can work on some behaviors and some other things. so that they're not disrupting the instruction of other students in the classroom. Right now in the budget, we do have a position for K-5. It was called the track program previously. That position is still in the budget. We would need to add an instructional aide to that, so that's that cost there. And then in looking at the tech center right now, where they house the 6 through 12 alt-ed program, that's growing as well. And so we're recommending an aide there. They need some additional support and help, because some of the students that do go to that program are students with special needs. And in order to maintain the IEPs right now, the teachers are doing all of that. Having an aide would just provide some additional support and coverage for those students. So you'll see those two pieces added in the budget. Any questions so far? Good. All right, so if you put all of those together in terms of student support positions, what we've tried to do is sort of rank them, and I'll tell you, you can toss this 90 different ways. They all matter, they're all important, but at the end of the day, you've got to put them in rank order so that when we know how much money we have, we can say we're going to pull this position, and this position. At the top of that really is the essential, the childhood special ed teacher. We've put that administrative intern teacher or / attendance clerk. And then your K-5 aide, your timeout room, your instructional aide, behavior support, and
Is this
cafeteria.
the one where the totals are flip-flop?
I flipped it, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I fixed it, yeah.
Right.
But on your paper, it is flip-flop, yeah. But the numbers at the bottom are accurate. So if we want to go with option A, which is your administrative intern, so that's the teacher scale, that would cost us $1.1 million. If you go with the little bit more budget-friendly option of having the attendance clerk, that's going to cost you $765. And that's for all of those positions, to get all of them. If we wanted to say these are critical, we want all of them, that's how much money we would have to have. What we're going to have to do, most likely, is chip away and decide we're going to take these ones, because we don't know that we're going to have enough funding to get all of these. My hope is we do, but we may not, so we just have to put them in some kind of order. And you guys can talk to me once you have time to digest this. If you think the order should be different, let me know.
Well, I don't want to derail your presentation. I think the conversations that I've heard and the people I've talked to in the community that know the discipline issues that we're having and all the different needs that we have. The question comes in a philosophy, as a philosophy, right? Do we continue to do capital improvements at the rate that we've been doing? Or do you fill these positions to give a better education and also a chance for these schools to get out of improvement?
Well, one of the options that we can talk with the Board of Supervisors is the easy part about capital is it can come out of like their unfunded, what's the name of
Their
it?
unrealized fund balance.
Unrealized fund balance, because they would be
Unassigned.
one-time purchases.
Talk about the
right?
slush fund, they call it, somebody calls it.
Yes, sir. Their fund balance.
Yeah, so that's an option to sustain the capital work. So in my mind, there's an option there potentially for that. Now, they would have to agree and support that. Versus this, where it really has to come out of reoccurring, because if we put these positions in, we know they got to be there next year. Or they're going to come to us and say, we want to cut your money, and then we have to find ways to cut positions potentially, because that's where the bulk of your budget comes in. So I don't know that we necessarily are sacrificing the capital work. I think we just have to look at it differently and approach it with them in a different way.
Yeah, because it's not a slush fund, it's a reserve, right? It's a reserve that you can get bonding with, those
Yeah.
type of things, which is smart.
And they're
Smart
well
business.
above their threshold that they set for themselves. So, I think it's fair for us to advocate and ask in that capacity. Now, obviously, it's going to be up to them to decide whether they agree with that or not. But I think for us, I don't know that we have to sacrifice. We can ask for both right now because they potentially have the capacity to do both. Maybe. Amy?
So on your option A column, are you assuming is the attendance clerk amount?
So that's in your B. So see how it's the lower amount?
Because
Did I
on
mess up
here,
the
it
numbers?
says for 8, it's 621.
Hang on, let me see. What did I do?
Oh, yeah, the 280.
And the 285 is if
Oops.
it's attendance
Yeah,
clerk.
yeah, yeah. I put the comma in the wrong place. Look at that. So it was right then. It was right the way it's on your paper.
It was,
So it's
But the totals at
621.
the bottoms are wrong then.
I'll go back and double check them, but they should be correct.
If you
But I'll,
put the 621
Yeah.
column A with people working on, because I was noticing.
Okay,
current column.
because I was like, wait.
yeah.
By the way, I want to be the
apologize.
admin intern at Springfield. And that would be the one everybody would want. If you don't have many kids.
But that one, we could, frame it a little bit differently because of the size there. So it could be that there are different things we do with that particular position. Right now, you have Ms. Kime, who acts in that sort of capacity. She's the librarian, the Title I, and I think the instructional coach, but she's also the admin designee there.
Do we have an idea of what teachers at any of the levels are currently working on an admin, so we know?
Yeah, we've got some really potentially good candidates, yeah. And it does give us a way to grow our own. If you get them in this role, you can really mold them and shape them and get them to where, and then we aren't looking so desperately for APs and principals because we don't have a program to kind of
What do we use Title II funds for? Because you could write those admin interns in that.
Title II, Mr.
That's
Hopkins. is that a
PD
conference?
and,
Yeah,
I just,
I'll have to get back to you. I know he told me, but I can't remember.
we've written admin interns in.
I want to say we're using them potentially for teachers, right?
Reduce the
Right.
classroom size. Be careful with that.
I know.
Unless you have every classroom for
We're
certification.
trying to move away from that, to get out of that loop.
But yeah, we've used it for admin interns.
Unfortunately, our Title I increase this year is not huge, so we were hoping to have some extra money maybe to play around with some of that, but it's not a huge increase this year, so that kind of went down the drain. Any other questions on this part? Does that answer your question?
It does, but I think if they say no, I think we really need as a board to understand what the difference is. Because I agree with people out in the public and with what we've talked about here. There's no point in continuing capital improvements unless there's something, maybe it's got to happen, right? And then allow people to be overstretched, children underserved, and a struggling school to keep up.
One of the things we have to be careful when we talk to the public as well, though, is that we are clear what the state construction funds are used for, because that's money that can only be used for capital. So,
I understand that
yeah,
totally.
so
Yep.
there's a chunk of money that is being spent. We need to make sure our public and our staff understand we couldn't use that for anything else if we wanted to.
And that's why we established that separate fund too, 2 years ago, so we could see that separately and track that separately.
And I would like, is that part of the presentation?
We haven't really included it because it's a static number. It's going to be there. We're not really
think it would be
focusing
good
on
to add
Fund 2.
Yeah, I think Dr. Johnson's got a great idea there.
Yeah, I think as we get closer to narrowing this down more, like if you guys recall last year, we did break down every single fund for you. I haven't really focused on that here because it's more about the operating for this, but that's a number that will show. There is a portion later that it talks about Fund 2, but we haven't really pushed those numbers because that's not changing unless they do decide. Right now, we've been told they're not really anticipating adding any more to that 1.8 million that we have. So that for us right now is just a static number that we'll share I think as these numbers become more finite, that's when that becomes more apparent. But we can certainly add something in. I think I do have a reference to it later on in the presentation. Okay. So in terms of other support positions, this is one that we actually brought to you last year. And this is our Power School management position. So a data system specialist, this would be one full-time person to work on Power School. So that's our student management system, but it's so much more than that. It houses our testing data. It's where Mr. Samples pulls all of that information for those 140 plus state reports that we have to do. He's responsible for all of those in addition to his work as a director of technology. And we're using Power School more and more now to pull data out. When we talk about chronic absenteeism, we're getting all of that information from Power School. But your information's only as good as what's put in and who's managing and keeping that. And it's no reflection on Mr. Samples to say that he's not doing that work. It's hard to be split in doing that work. So we are putting this in there to see if there are funds where we could potentially get this position in the budget, because I do think it is a critical position for us as a division, especially as more and more things go towards the data side and the computer, solely not paper-based anymore. So So that one's in here for you with the salary and benefit. All right, and so the other big chunk, so you've got these new positions that we just talked about. Now, the other big chunk we've got to consider are these positions that we added last year that are currently existing. People are sitting in these jobs and they're grant funded. We were hoping last year to get some funding from the Board of Supervisors for some of these that didn't go through. So we're bringing these back because while we have one more year in the grant for these positions, we don't necessarily want to leave them till the last year to fund them. So there are currently 7 positions that are funded through either ESSER 2 or ESSER 3. And again, all of those will expire for these employees on June 30th of 2024. And then we as a division have to have those funds expended by September of 2024. So the total cost for all of those positions is about $560,000. Any questions about those? They should look familiar from last year. All right, so some current unknowns that really aren't sort of calculated in here yet because we just don't know whether the state's going to fund all of them, whether there's going to be a local requirement. So we're putting those on pause for now, but we're going to have to, if the state doesn't fund them, we'll have to bring them into the picture. Or whether it's this year that they have to, usually there's a year or two where you have time to build up to it. So it wouldn't necessarily be this year's budget, it might be next year's budget that we have to build these in. But the reading specialists at the middle school, again, a great thing that's in the Senate and the House budgets, but how's it going to be funded? So the approximate cost for 2 of those people would be about $155,000. So we'll wait to hear more on that. The retention bonus, we talked about this earlier. That's $1,000 for all staff in December again. The approximate cost of that, depending on number of employees, because if we do get some of these new staff positions, that's going to increase the number of employees, could be between $550,000, $600,000. Again, what we don't know is how much is the state going to fund of that. Last year, they did only for SOQ funded positions, which was about half, roughly half. Board of Supervisors supplied us with the additional half for that. And again, we'll publicly say thank you to them for that because it was so well received by our staff. So we'll wait to hear more on that, of whether we need to look for money and talk with the Board of Supervisors about funding that or whether the state's going to fully fund it. Calculation tool error for FY24. Again, hoping that that will be fixed and that becomes a moot point and we don't have to worry about that money. Otherwise, the locality is going to have to pick that up. And then there's a couple of the legislative mandates out there that we talked about earlier that we just don't know yet where they're going to fall. So whether they need to be in this budget, the next budget, are they state funded, local funded, we don't know.
Well, I don't know. I didn't hear it. No, I don't see it. So what about things like instructional costs that some of these things are going to cost us? So like putting reading specialists at the middle school. You just don't get people. They have to have like Spire or something to teach. And then like the Virginia Literacy Act come in and they say you have to do this, that, and the other. We don't even know if they're going to require us to buy this curriculum they're going to tell us to choose from. And for people to get trained in the science of where are we with the training piece? Or are we just waiting to hop on the train when they tell us when it's coming through?
No, I think we're waiting for more description from them in terms of what, because I don't want us to jump too fast and then we expended money and we shouldn't have.
Well, I know. I just mean that you have to think ahead too, because this summer all your reading specialists are going to have to do this training in the summer. And they're going to want things then because they've heard all this great stuff. And is there anywhere in the budget do you take a budget to her of what you want for instructional or?
Yes.
Okay.
But one thing I can speak to about that too is we're working with TTAC through our VTSS work that we do with them. And one of the things they're getting us started working on is doing an assessment within the division of knowing they're going to help us work through so we can determine who exactly has what training. Just take, for example, in years past, Fort and Gillington training's been done, right? And we try to catch people up on that as we hire new people. But getting an overall, so we know who's got what, who is not just maybe even been trained, but is a trainer in what, so that we can prioritize and help determine those needs a little more precisely.
And we have a substantial amount of our SO3 is for instructional materials and supplies allocated for that.
Okay.
So I feel really comfortable right now that we have, for the next year and a half, we have money to cover anything that we might need. And I think that gives us the comfort to know we can wait for VDOE to kind of,
Yeah, they've
Explain a little
said,
bit
don't
more.
create anything.
Right.
We're all going to give it to you, but no one can answer the question of when we give you the list of curriculum, who's going to pay for it?
That's right.
Because you're required to pick one.
Yes.
Right.
And yes, there's waivers, but they said last week, yes, we have waivers, but if you think that you're going to get the waiver, you're never going to be able to fit our criteria. I mean, who has time to write your own? I mean, but they said slow your roll on wanting to buy stuff, but it's just like when I see these two middle school reading specialists. I mean, you don't just send them in. Well, what are you going to do?
I think we feel comfortable right now. If they were to be in the budget and in place for this coming school year, we could supply them with whatever they need. And again, thank you, ESER 3. For that. We're going to miss that in a couple of years.
I'm not.
You're going to miss the money, not the paperwork.
Yep.
So, all right, so we'll keep you posted on some of those as to where they land. So in terms of your summary for total staffing needs, if you look at those student support positions, so that's your early childhood teacher, your behavior support, your attendance clerk versus your admin. If you look at the admin route, that's 101 or 1.1 million. Your existing grant positions, those are the ones people are currently sitting in, that's 560. And then that data systems position. So if we wanted to get all of those, $1.7 million. Option B is with the clerk, attendance clerk, you're looking at $1.4 million. Any questions there? So any of you win the lottery, let me know. All right, so just a couple of other things that have come up or need to be addressed. So our health insurance increase, that's approximately right now sitting at about 9.9%. We're hoping to get that down, but I don't know how successful we're going to be on that. We kind of shut the door on that, but we can still ask. But that's sitting right now at $422,000. You guys had asked for school board member salary increase for an estimate of that. If you make it commensurate with the raise that staff are getting at 6%, it would cost us $1,600 for each of you. So not a lot of, $1,600 total, not each, to get you 6% of what you're currently being paid. And then increased pay for sub-haulers. So this is something we just, currently, so I think it's school secretaries in most situations are the people calling the substitutes. So every day of the week, including Sundays, they're calling to get positions filled. So I'm a teacher, I call and say, I'm not going to be at work tomorrow, can you get me a sub? They're pulling out their sub list, they're using their phones, they're calling to get those subs. Right now, they receive $309 a year. $30 a month, take out taxes, they might have enough to go and get a combo meal at a fast food restaurant now, right? Because those prices have gone up. We're proposing an increase to that, and we think that's a fair to raise it to $1,250 each. We'd like for it to be much higher, but right now that would put it at $125 a month. The total cost for that increase is $8,000. So not huge money, but we want to recognize them and say we're listening and we hear you. And 309 is not really fair for the work that they're doing. So that's in there. You'll see that come up. All
I
right.
just want to go
Yeah.
on record for saying I'm against the increase for the board members personally.
And I'm on the way out.
Well, what we can do when we get to the final point where you've got to say yes or no, in or out, that'll be the point you tell us to keep it in or take it out, unless you want us to go ahead and just pull it down.
I know that's why you try to get on the board.
I didn't even know that we got paid initially, so.
Okay.
I don't, I mean, I understand it, but the admin's not getting, the central office aren't getting raises, why should we?
I'd rather go to one of these support positions. I mean, it's only a little bit, but I'd rather go to.
Central office is, right?
Well, have you?
Yeah, they got,
CA.
that one I don't think does.
Their staff
Stipends are static.
Stipends for like coaches and school board members and stuff. They're static. They never see those 3 or 5 or 7% increases.
Right.
So everybody else sort of creeps up. And then 10 years go by and your school board members still getting that same low stipend, which is less than a football coach. Just to give you an example. I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure. Just throw it out there.
All right, I'm going to move on. Capital project. So this would be in addition to some of the things we've already talked about this year. We shared with you earlier this year an updated capital improvements plan with some of those things that needed to happen. Like one of the immediate things was the softball lights at the girls' fields at both high schools. I believe those went up today, right? Okay, polls are up. These are some things we would like to propose to the Board of Supervisors outside of that. So these would be additional costs. These would be new costs outside of what we've already proposed or what we're waiting on. If you recall, we have that facility study. We've gotten grant approval for that. So we're going to be paying for the facility study out of grant money. And they want to wait to do some other capital stuff. And I think we need to, it's smart to wait to see what the most pressing needs are that come from that facility study. So in terms of some of these things, some of them are things that we need some immediate attention with. Some of our school cameras need to be upgraded. Now they're becoming more and more critical to us when student incidences do happen. It allows us to see sometimes, and it takes the guesswork out of who did what. But right now, some of those are aging out. Some of them just need to be replaced completely. You'll see on the purchase orders for over 10,000 tonight, there is some upgrades to cameras. That's coming from the school security grant that we get each year. We'll continue to apply for that, and most of the time we spend some of that on school cameras, but there's additional work that needs to be done, and it's more of a pressing need. Right now, our high schools absolutely need their systems replaced. They have aged out. And each Monday, our administrators are going to have to, they go around and reset every single DVR to ensure that those things are recording each week. They should not have to be doing that. And if, gosh forbid, if they forget to push a button, then we may not have the footage that we need. So those are sort of some non-negotiable things that we need to do. We've talked about this safety and security of now extending to our outside most exterior doors that you don't have immediate access to come into our vestibules. That would be putting up what we call airphones and a badge system. So the airphone is where you push the button, secretary sees you on their computer, you talk to them, they decide whether or not you even get entry into the school. So all of the exterior doors become locked. Teachers would have a badge that they could use to swipe in, so they wouldn't necessarily have to push the button and wait for somebody to let them in. Just another added layer of security. We've looked at ones at, we were at the sheriff's office the other day, and they have one from, is it Valley Automation? Yes. So we got to see it and how it works, and they're really nice. They've had them for a long period, a number of years, and have had no issues with them. So Valley Automation is looking at each of our buildings and giving us a full assessment of what we would need at each building to have that. So it's just another layer of security. School bus arm cameras, this is becoming more and more critical as more and more people refuse to stop when the red light arm is out. Some of the buses in the Luray area do have those cameras, and they will get ticketed. We want to extend that to every school bus. So in order to do that, it's going to be about $25,000. At our meeting with the Board of Supervisors in February, we showed them a new bus that we had just gotten and how wonderful it is, and we showed them an older I think 15 of our buses are over 250,000 miles. So we're putting in here a request to get 5 new buses in 1 year. We've got to make a dent in that school bus rotation. We just have too many buses that are aging out. And then student cars and vans. With increased needs with students, we're seeing increased needs in having different types of transportation available for some of our students with special needs. And we're just seeing some of our cars starting to age out as well. So we're estimating either cars or vans 3 to 4 at about $120,000. So that puts that total at just over $1 million. And again, this would come from that unfunded, tell me again, I'm sorry.
Unassigned fund balance.
I'll get it right. Unassigned fund balance. That request would come specifically from that balance fund, not from operating money. So this now just sort of sums up everything we've talked about. So bear with me for a minute, but this is where our money comes from. So in FY '23, those three funds, you primarily get money from your state, from your locality, and then from federal government and some other miscellaneous things like renting out our building. Last year, 64% of our funding came from the state, 26% from the locality, and then the federal and other is there. Those funds are allocated to three specific areas. Fund 1 is that operating budget. That's where all of our payroll, 86% of that is people, your personnel is 86% of that. Fund 2 is that one we were talking about, Mr. Painter. That's our capital improvement fund. And that, when you see that number, when we do present it to you, it's going to show that $1.8 million from school construction funding. And then Fund 5 is the food service or the nutritional services. I'm not focusing on 2 and 5 tonight. We're just focusing on 1. So in terms of our funding sources, this budget right now as a proposal to you is based on the governor's amended budget from December of 2022. His budget proposed an increase for us of $359,000. So in reality, today, we have all those millions of dollars of positions and things that we want to add. We only have $359,000 coming to us from the state. So if we want to do those things, we have to go to the locality and ask them to fund that difference. And what you're seeing there is based on the proposed amendments from the House and the Senate. There's a range. We could, if the House one, which is the lower, it's about an increase of $221,000 to the upper end. If the Senate one is about $1.2 million. So that would mean our state funding would be anywhere between $580,000 and $1.6 million. You add in that 359 to that range. Does that make sense? So that leaves us with the question of what do we ask the locality for? What money do we go? Because we've got to at some point give them a number so they can build their budget. And all of this, again, you see those asterisks there. They're all based on, this is just all preliminary proposed. We don't know what these current numbers are. And they're going to change, and we're going to have amendments, and we're going to have revisions. So if we look at where we are with all of the things that we need and want, in terms of that option A, again, that's your admin intern line, a little bit more expensive. You add in your substitute callers, your school board, your health insurance, your staffing needs, $4.4 million. Option B with your attendance clerks, $3.2 million to get all of those things that we want. So your range is 4.4 to 3.2. And then this is where we consider, these are sort of our non-negotiables or absolutely necessary. In terms of the compensation, we know the state is saying if you want to access all of your state funds, you've got to give that raise of 12%. So that's there, and that includes those classified adjustments as well. Health insurance is a non-negotiable. We have to have health insurance for our staff. Early childhood special education teacher and that aide to me is a non-negotiable simply because those kids are coming and we have to have somewhere to put them. So if the only thing we did tonight was say we're going to do these absolutely necessary things, it would cost us 2.7 or $1.9 million. And because there's a difference from what the state can give us, we would have to go to our locality to make up the difference for it. These would be things that we would prefer to add. And so that's some of your staffing needs. That's looking at your new positions and your currently those grant funded positions that are there. And that excludes that early childhood. We put that in essential because we need that. So doing all of those things, we would need an additional 1.7 or an additional 1.4 million. And then the wants. So that would be the school, not necessarily required or preferred, but a want. To me, the $8,000 for the substitute calls, we'll make that happen. We'll find a way to make that happen. So that's your wants there. So here's where you guys have to tell me sort of where you want to go and where you want to lean with all of that information. So consideration number 1 for you is taking those things we identified as absolutely necessary, the compensation increases, the health insurance, and the early childhood classroom, plus only those new staff positions. So that would be your administrative intern or your clerk, your behavior support positions, the ISS or timeout rooms. If you only wanted to do those 2 things, it would come at a cost of $3.8 million or $2.6 million. Consideration number 2 is, again, those absolutely necessary things and taking those existing grant-funded positions and going ahead and getting them in the local budget this year, $3.3 million to $2.4 million. And then consideration 3 is sort of the middle of the road of those two things. You take the absolutely necessary, you take maybe some of the new positions and you take some of the grant positions, move them over to local funding, and you're looking at between 3.6 and 2.7 million. So just giving you a range. Highest end, you're looking at 3.8. Lowest is you're looking at about 2.4. Any questions there with those? Are you still with me? All right, so taking those considerations, knowing what we know with what we have potentially at the state level, and again, it's a range because we don't know the numbers right now. And where would that put us in requests to the locality? So consideration number 1, absolutely necessary new staff positions. You would be asking the locality to fund you between $3.3 million and $2.3 million. Consideration 2, getting those grant funded positions in there and the absolutely necessary, you would be asking for between 2.7 and $1.7 million. And then 3, sort of the hybrid version of that, the combo version, would be asking for anywhere between $3 million and $2 million. And that's asking for everything, right? That's all those things that we've presented that we're saying are needs in the schools and to support students and teachers and the work that we do. That's the upper end of all of that is what you're seeing on this chart.
Well, if we want the biggest impact on instruction, which we all say that it is, you almost have to try to get your admin interns to take some of the weight off your admin. But then again, part of me is like, with ESSER, they warned us, don't put people in it. And now we're facing people. So I'm a go big or go home girl.
So the next slide is the same thing. It's just that other option with the attendance clerk. So your range there that you'd be asking the Board of Supervisors for is just a little bit lower. So going from 2.1 million down to 1.2 million. So same idea, just that different track of that option B with the attendance clerk that we said was a little bit budget friendly. So you have some options to consider whether you want to go the admin intern route, a little more expensive, or go with the attendance clerk. I think we know where Dr. Painter stands.
I mean, if you want to grow your own too. I mean.
All right, so if you look at that, the range of the local funding for both options A and B falls somewhere between 1.2 million and $3.2 million. Our initial request could be at the high end, $3.2 million. You could go kind of the middle of the road, go with 2.2 million. You could come in at the low end at 1.2. You could suggest to me another amount that you want us to carry forward, knowing a couple of things with that. It's an estimate. It's not a finality. The numbers are going to change over time as we get more definitive budget numbers from the state, as we get more solid details related to some of these positions, like the reading specialist. What do we have to do with them? What are we encumbered to do with them? Whether the state's going to cover a portion of their salary, whether the locality has to cover it. Whatever we propose to the Board of Supervisors, we'll keep in constant communication with them, as we've promised to do, to let them know as things change and how those numbers sort of ferret out. And then we'll just make those budget amendments and revisions as we have to. And we were in this, not quite this position last year, but we knew we were going to have to potentially make some budget amendments and revisions, and they were okay with that. Our sense from them, they were okay with that, knowing, because they were in a similar boat with state funding as well.
Categorically.
No, we are, they are. I don't think, right? That's me get my facts right. So that's sort of where I need some guidance from you all, because here's the timeline of sort of where we are. And again, knowing that all of this is really fluid. But we did have a work session scheduled for next Thursday. I'm recommending to you right now that we table that, because until we have more information from the state to really dig in, we could come and just rehash these same slides next week. And I'm guessing that you all don't want to do that. So I would recommend that we table that meeting. March 20th.
Superintendent's recommendation.
March 20th, which is the Monday after spring break, that's when the county administrator shares her proposed budget. So we are going to have to give them a number sometime next week that they will put in their proposed budget. And that number we know is not going to be the final number. The 23rd, I'll come back to you all. We'll have an approved budget. Hopefully, we'll have some more numbers from the state. I don't know. Right now, we don't know when their special session is going to be called. And with $1 billion gap, I don't think anybody's feeling like that's going to happen in the next week and a half. So then the 28th, we go before the Board of Supervisors to do a budget presentation. So we'll lay out some of this and why we're requesting this money, talking with them. April 13th, you have a work session scheduled then because we'll know more from potentially the Board of Supervisors if this were a normal budget year. And then you can see the other dates. The ultimate thing here is for us on May 11th to have our final budget adoption. I don't think that happened for us last year until June. It was like the Thursday before the last week of school, and then Dr. Johnson and his team cranked out those contracts.
Remember last year, we actually did the contracts with the statement, so the funds are not available. We don't have.
We did the raise, yeah, that's right. So while this is a timeline on paper, it could shift again based on where we are, but this is the piece, I just need some guidance from you all on where you want us to go in terms of going in on the high, middle, low, or some other amount. And I would say you don't necessarily need to tell me tonight, but I would ask you to let me know by the early part of next week because I do need to get with Ms. Moeller and give her a number for her March 20th presentation. So welcome to give it to me tonight or get back with me and I'll bug you till I get a number that I can have consensus with and move forward with.
I mean, I'm with Dr. Payne. I say we go for it and try. I mean,
I think they heard the concerns too. So.
So you're saying go in at the high end at the 3.2?
worth a try.
Okay.
I just got a couple questions. So our budget last year, we carried over how many funds?
How much? It was a little over $1 million, and you're going to actually get ready to have resolution on all of that because we have already utilized some of that for the staff bonuses, as well as we're getting ready to ask for a little bit more of it for some other things.
Just a little over $1 million.
Yes, sir.
And the reserve that the county has, what number is that right now?
It's it's around $20 million, which is at about 48%. And they only have a policy that they have to carry 15%.
20 million. So if we're asking for all this extra stuff, we're talking.
Yeah, but what we're asking for.
Tony's huge
some of it-
percentage, right?
Yeah, can't come out of that unfunded, that balance, that 20 million, because that has to be one-time occurrence
Okay.
for them. So the capital
So we'll
improvement
just
thing.
ask for 18.
So like the extra buses, the cameras in the hallways, the door safety A-phones, that could come out of
I'm out
that.
of there, right?
Time expenditures.
Yeah, one-time expenditures, but all of this other, which is the 3.2, that's the salaries, those are reoccurring. Those would have to come out of their regular operating budget as well. So they have to have the revenue to support whatever we propose, and we're one piece of their pie.
You know how much they've added to that reserve fund? I don't want to call it the name that everybody calls it out in public.
Yes, sir.
Enterprise?
Slush.
I do have some slides on that from their auditor who gave a presentation, and I can share that with Dr. Fox to share with you
So
all.
it's been growing every year.
Yes,
So I'm
sir.
trying to get an idea.
Yes, sir.
Because, the realities are there's older folks who can't hardly pay their taxes to keep their house, right? And we go to these things and we're asking for extra money. This is people struggling just to pay that, keep their home that they've worked for their entire life.
Right.
So
So
we gotta
really
think
the
about that
question
when we're
is,
asking these
right, what other revenue source can we establish in this county besides taxing the residents? Is really the real question, in my opinion.
I agree 100%.
Right.
And when we have our marching orders from people that are in the community, right?
Yes, sir.
What is this in comparison? What did we ask for last year?
I think we came in at a little bit over $1 million.
1.2.
that we
I
asked
think we
for.
asked for, and I think it ended up being just over 600,000.
Yes.
That they gave us.
Yeah, and the number, you'll see the number of what they allocated is higher than that, because remember last year they took that Johnson Controls piece out. So that showed as
skewed our
revenue and
numbers
skewed our
last year.
numbers, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think we went in with about 1.2.
So asking for 3.2 is a significant increase.
Yes. Yes. I'm sure it's going to create some waves.
And I understand our business case too, right? We got
Right.
a lot of obstacles getting to education.
And-
This year has only shown it to be worse than last.
And I think, Mr. Painter, that Dr. Fox and I spoke today about this. I think a lot of the budget cuts in the past, I understand that they had to be made in order to make do, but I think the making do is what has gotten us to this point currently, and we're seeing greater effects from our making do in the past.
An example of that is you couple years ago, I don't know, Paul, you can speak to it. We cut a substantial number of instructional aides in each school. I mean, a huge number of instructional aides. You're seeing that now come to, there's just not bodies to help people in the building. Instructional aides are critical to the instructional work that's being done. So we're asking to put some of those back in. So, I understand every year you make decisions based on what's in front of you, and you have to do that. At the time, that was a place where cuts could be made that had to be made. But like Ms. Sechrist is saying, we're feeling that now because we need those people back in the building to support the kids.
Phrase that was used back then was funding the budget on the backs of the employees. An example was, not only did we cut back on the beginning of the year, but we also cut 5% of their salary. They went from 200-day contracts to 190-day contracts. And so that's always been a bone of contention. Someone's got to pay. And a lot of times it's been the employees who pay. Balance.
It's the saying, today's solutions are tomorrow's problems. Right. But I think it's when you look at the big picture and sustainability and, yeah, it might be more of an investment now, but the results that we get from that investment are worth it, I think, in my opinion, but I'm also not the one making those decisions, so.
Okay, so
Well, if we go with A, or option A, with the understanding, if more state money would come, then that would reduce what we're asking for. And they have to understand that. Well, because that happens. And especially since all this mess with that mistake, that's hindered a lot of things. So again, go in with the understanding. If more state money comes after all this other mess is cleared up, it's going to go down. If it doesn't come, we probably know we're not going to get the full amount. But I think you still go and see what happens. And let's hope that the state gets it right sooner than later.
But here's the problem. Page County does not have a voice with our state officials. We know who they are, and we talk to them at the over
Yeah.
Triple Tech, right? But we really don't have a voice.
there is one voice that we are a part of, is the Coalition of Small and Rural Schools. And so Dr. Keith Kerrigan from Bristol, Virginia Schools, he chairs that. And he is a pretty advocating voice for us as small. Like the minute some of this stuff came out, we get emails from him saying, I've already talked to Secretary Gadara, I've already talked to Superintendent Below, I'm talking to this legislator who oversees that educational committee. So we do have that voice who's advocating for us in that capacity, but that's one voice. But we are a part of that coalition, and he is pretty good at advocating for us. So that voice is there. It's not, an overpowering voice, because small and rural school divisions are small and rural school divisions. Places like Fairfax and Virginia Beach have lobbyists on staff. They are paid nothing they're paid to only to lobby with the legislature for their school division. We don't have those kinds of positions. We'll never have those kinds of positions. So there is a difference there, but at least we have that voice for us.
So what's our students think?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I'm gonna take Jackson when we go on the 28th or 23rd. Can you come with me, Jackson?
What's the total budget, Dr. Fox, for his perspective? Total full budget?
Last year was 49 million, right around 49 million.
So three,
Yeah, 3.2 million of whatever the highest number,
that's
3.2.
6% of the total budget?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
I will say, when there was discussion going on countywide, when they were talking about consolidation and the middle schools and all that, they had students come to the schools and share their thoughts. I don't know if that would be good, bad, or indifferent, but it's important for students, to understand you didn't realize the money involved, did you? And most don't, and that's not
Yeah.
your fault.
No.
Most people don't.
Yeah.
Most,
Right.
unless you work in it, you don't know. But at the same time, like you said, Taylor, we got to do what we got to do in order to make it work. While they're in school, we can't control so much what's outside. That's the sad part. Because a lot of things get undone once they go home and then they come back. But all in all, I just think the Board of Supervisors, I can't believe, that they can't understand that this is what we're proposing. But until we know for sure, and we realize we may have to back down, and we're ready to do that. We've got Plan B ready to go. But I don't know. That's just me.
If I'm a board supervisor, I need to know why.
Oh,
I know we had a community forum and they weren't there, but
we asked for that large of an increase. Is that gonna hinder the relationship or send major red flag? Like, that's the only thing that concerns me. Do we go middle of the road and ask for the 2.2? I mean, yeah, I'd like to ask for all of it, but is that going to,
I mean, they took 2 hours of my life I'll never get back up there in Page County Middle School's library and heard all these issues.
I'm not arguing that.
and they correlated to,
I'm not- I mean-
$55 a day jail time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so we'll take that up with the
Long-term,
sheriff.
this is a long-term investment. This is not a short-term gain, this is a long-term investment.
I think if we ask for the larger amount versus the middle amount, it won't matter. They're going to do what they're going to do. They
You're
won't
gonna
take
say
it personally.
level funded, figure it
Not gonna
out.
Take it personally.
You decide how the money's spent.
Well, but the
mean, I
problem
can
is,
quote 'em
one
now.
took it personal on our first meeting.
My hope is that we're building our relationship, that we can sit down and talk through this and explain to them where we are, and that these are just proposed numbers that are based on not knowing where the state is. The state's going to come with more funding. We just don't know whether it's going to be on the lower end or the higher end. Our hope is it'll be on the higher end. But my hope is that we can
Well, I'd like to
continue
think that.
building the relationship that we're trying to do and have conversations about this.
If we go with the next one,
The 2.2?
if we go with that one, and then we get more money from the state, do they take away what they've already?
We can always reduce our local ask. Tyler Olson and I work hand in hand when we are appropriating all of this money, the grants that are coming in, things that are changing. So at any given time throughout the year, we can make changes with a resolution that are needed.
Well, that gives you a little leeway there, but,
And that's
same
where we
time.
landed last year towards the end of this, was with the commitment that they would honor this amount, and if we got more state funding, that we would come back and say we got it, and then we would reduce it, and that's fair.
Yeah.
Because again, we're one piece, and we understand that. We're one piece of their pie. All of our schools and they're pieces of our big pie, and all of them want, because there are things that, principals submitted that aren't even on this list, that didn't make this list because they just we couldn't get all of this stuff in. So that's the unfortunate part of having to prioritize it. There are things the departments want that didn't make the list.
So as long as you articulate, to them, as things shake out, we can go back and.
It might be one thing
Adjust.
is to show them something like, this is what it was if we took everything everybody wanted. And this is what's based on our needs assessment, because basically that's what this is.
Yeah, because we have a line in there where we've added proposing, an instructional aid at each building to start rebuilding that. To add more money to the CIP for some of these things like restroom renovations, but we need to wait on the facility study for that. A building wants another special education teacher. Those things aren't on here right now because these other things sort of taking priority over.
I kind of think we need to show them that we have prioritized, and this is.
This is what we came
Yeah,
down
it's a
to.
good presentation.
I think it's hard, I'm with Joanne, Mr. Painter, to say that, our county is struggling. And we see how much our families are struggling. And the last thing we want to do is create another burden on them. And I'm interested in exploring those other revenue sources. Like, what can we do as a community that isn't just raising taxes? 'Cause I know there has to be something else. It's just.
Because that's the first place they're gonna go.
Yeah.
Is if we say we're asking
Sure.
for more, they're gonna go, well, then that means we have to raise
That's
taxes.
their default.
That's
Yeah.
that's the
bigger-
default answer.
Picture than that.
I mean, I'm okay with the 3.2. As long as you're comfortable and you don't think if it's going through, you don't think it's gonna,
I think you could ask for $5 extra and somebody's feathers are going to get ruffled. So
Well, how about I draft it in terms of what we're going to communicate and why, and then we can take a look at it and we can get a sense of whether we want to go on the higher than the middle.
And I think that draft needs to include what the problems are while we're trying to solve them this way. Because we got a lot of money with COVID, right? But now we've got the after effects of COVID that's not going to be funded. It's going to keep on going, right? Your discipline, everything. So it's more than just COVID. I mean, it's just family. It's the whole deal. Just society.
Some of this was
Social media.
pre-COVID. We saw,
Sure.
behaviors
It's just
exhibiting
exasperated
pre-COVID.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll do that. I'll draft and share that out with you all as soon as possible, and then we can decide. You guys comfortable with that? All right, last thing I want to say before I turn it over, because I'm happy to not talk anymore. I just want to thank you all for Tuesday coming to the community forum, and I want to say thank you to the people out there who came. I think all of us left with some sense of being rejuvenated in some capacity, just with the excitement of what that brings. So we're looking forward to continuing that process, and we just want to say thank you for everybody for participating.
thank you for putting the presentation together. Yeah. Well,
Phenomenal.
Good.
Ms. Seacrest, I believe we are up to you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Dr.
can I make a motion to approve 7.01?
She is ready for you.
Goodness.
Funny.
You all have been provided with the claims certification where the operating budget was $232,058.35. Capital improvement expenditures, $162,859.19. Food service expenditures, $36,076.35 for total expenditures of $430,993.89. Along with that, you've been provided with a list of claims and the check registers. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Make a motion, we approve the claims for payment as presented.
Second.
With a motion by Dr. Painter and a second by Mr. Gubler to approve the claims for payment as presented.
Mr. Gabriel.
Yes.
Ms. Alger.
Yes.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes. Ms. Seacrest, you're up again.
Yes, we do have two purchase orders over 10,000 this evening for your approval. The first one is for the security cameras that Dr. Fox referenced earlier. That is with the state security grant. $87,942. And I'm not sure why your amount's not showing up there for the second one's not showing at all. Okay. Well, we do have a second one for a 2012 Ford Ecoline. It is a box truck that Mr. Turner has found. It is $38,576.19, and that would be paid for out of our transportation funds.
What year did you say that was?
It is a 2012, yes, I know.
Feels like no,
But Mr. Turner did go look at it. He has laid eyes on it. He has driven it. He has seen it. He has pictures.
I can shed some light. on it.
Yeah.
It has 15,000 miles on it. It's government. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's yeah,
It's a huge.
very,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And so I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the purchase orders over 10,000 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Painter and a second by Ms. Alger to approve the purchase orders over 10,000.
Yes.
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 Blake, you're on.
Mr. Samuels. This is like speed dating here. Here we go.
Allow me to slow that down a little
What else
for
can we
you.
put in together?
Let's take that off.
Now, I'm thinking, what else can I add to this to get?
I'll try to move through it a little quick. Good evening, board members. I come before you this evening to present a proposal for the Virginia Department of Education's Advancing Computer Science Education Grant that aims to enhance the integration of computer science with a multidisciplinary approach to promote critical thinking skills among teachers and students. The proposal focuses on grades K through 5 and includes 18 teachers, 3 per grade level, working collaboratively in the integration program, which will be led by our instructional technology resource teachers. Our proposal involves a collaborative effort between ITRTs and classroom teachers meeting several times a month. Over the course of these meetings, ITRTs and teachers will iteratively evaluate lessons developed during planning sessions to produce exemplar models with the objective of uploading them into the GoOpenVA online platform and making them accessible to other educators throughout the state. GoOpenVA, if you're not familiar with it, is a community of educators and partners working together to address the learning goals of the profile of a Virginia graduate, and of which VDOE is a collaborative partner. The first meeting of the month between the ITRTs and teachers will be scheduled during school hours, and a sample lesson on the computer science SOL topic of the month will be shared by the ITRTs beforehand. Teachers will work in grade level clusters to brainstorm ideas for the standards listed under the topic of the month. Topics include algorithms and programming, computing systems, data and analysis, cybersecurity, impacts of computing, and networking and the internet. By the end of the meeting, each teacher will have a basic layout of a lesson plan that integrates computer science, and social studies. To support this effort, funds from the grant will be used to provide for a half-day substitute to allow teachers to attend this meeting. The second meeting of the month will be scheduled outside school hours, and teachers will receive a stipend for this time. Teachers will share their completed lesson with the group, and ITRTs will schedule a time with them to assist in the classroom. After the lesson has been taught, the teacher and the ITRT will evaluate the lesson and make adjustments for future lessons. The proposed project's outcomes include promoting the connection between computational thinking and developing critical thinking skills among teachers and students. Teachers and students will build their knowledge of educational technology, digital citizenship, and information technology while increasing their computer literacy. The project will create a platform for teachers to develop and share multidisciplinary lessons that integrate technology standards into the core curriculum. This will help to ensure that students are well prepared for the workforce and for life in a technology-driven world. This grant proposal aligns with Virginia's 5 C's, which include critical thinking, creative thinking, collaboration, communication, and citizenship. These characteristics are all integral parts of the profile of Virginia graduate. Funds received from the grant will be allocated to stipend teachers and ITRTs participating in an iterative lesson development process to be shared at professional development workshops with the full division. 18 classroom teachers and 3 ITRTs will receive a stipend for project participation from May 2023 through August of 2024. So it's a fairly lengthy process. The total amount for this particular allocation will be $15,750. Funds will also be allocated for half-day substitutes, as I mentioned earlier, to cover classes while teachers are in professional development, for classroom teachers to participate in lesson design and implementation outside of school hours, and for ITRTs to train and facilitate the process outside of school hours. The total amount for this particular allocation is $31,320. Funds will also be allocated to participants to offset FICA, and this amount will be $3,429. Funds will also be allocated into two categories for supplies: materials and consumables and instructional technology devices. $82,415 will be spent on instructional technology devices such as iPads, coding kits, VR headsets, weather stations, and many more. $46,583 will be used to purchase materials and consumables such as experiment and project supplies that are essential for hands-on learning experiences. Total amount for this allocation is $128,998. Total funds requested through this grant amounts to $179,497. This grant proposal offers an opportunity to provide our students with an education that will help them prepare them for future careers that will be both challenging and rewarding in an ever-changing world. We believe that this format will provide the best opportunity for our teachers to grow their technology integration skills and provide students with the opportunities for more meaningful and engaging learning. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay, we really don't have to approve this, right?
She has to, Ms. Gordon has to sign it, so it did say somewhere in the application process that the board needed to approve it.
Yes, it does actually require a majority board approval to submit the application for proposal.
Well, I'll make a motion, we approve it.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Dr. Painter and a second by Mrs. Sullivan Smoot to approve the grant application for advancing computer science.
Mr. Payne. Mr. Payne.
Yes.
Dr. Payne.
Yeah.
Mr. Gabriel.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan Smith.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Dr. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am. If you remember last month, I brought to you an updated building usage form, which we want to just consolidate the form to include anytime somebody applies for use of buildings, facilities, fields. And we also revised the employee field fees, upgraded to comparable with current pay rates. $30 an hour for employees in cafeteria, 45 for admin support, tech support. And so that was informational a couple of weeks ago, and just asked for your approval tonight.
Make a motion, we approve policy KG for the building use.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Alger and a second by Mr. Painter to approve policy KG.
Dr. Payne.
Yep.
Mr. Gabriel.
Yes.
Ms. Alger.
Yes.
Mr. Payne.
Yes.
Mrs. Sullivan Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes. Thank you. Ms. Ryman, Middle School Program Studies?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, board members. At last meeting we presented the draft for the middle school program of studies for 23-24. Now we would just ask for your approval for that proceeding. If you have any questions, happy to address those.
Did anything change since we presented?
The only small thing that changed was on the page that denoted the sixth grade schedule. We had to make one minor edit to the exploratory wheel for sixth grade. And instead of music 6, added specifically band 6 and choir. That was the only thing. Thank you.
That was my approval, by the way. I make a motion that we approve the middle school program of studies.
Second.
A motion by Dr. Painter and a second by Ms. Alger to approve the middle school program of study.
Mr. Gabriel.
Yes.
Ms. Alger.
Yes.
Mr. Payne.
Yes.
Dr. Payne.
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan Smith.
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Sechrist, resolutions for the
Yes.
first one, communities and school grant.
I apologize, Dr. Painter, before I start.
I'll read both of these into the record. The first one is the resolution to the Page County Board of Supervisors requesting adjustment of the 2022-2023 school budget for the Community Schools Development and Implementation Grant. Whereas the Page County School Board has received approval and authorization during the fiscal year of 2022-2023 of a grant award to support the development and implementation of community schools in the amount of $449,655.50. And whereas the anticipated funds in these grants will exceed the original estimated budget for the fiscal year 2022-2023, and whereas the Page County School Board will receive the additional funds channeled through the Virginia Department of Education and grantors directly, and whereas the grant award requires that these funds be used to provide a framework for integrated student supports, expanded and enriched learning opportunities, active family and community engagement, and collaborative leadership and practices. And now therefore be it resolved that the Page County School Board, for audit and record-keeping purposes, to keep the 2022-2023 budget in balance with no increase or decrease of local appropriation involved, respectfully request the Page County Board of Supervisors to appropriate additional state funds from the Community Schools Development and Implementation Grant in the amount totaling $449,655. You can see the expenditure and resource table below, or resource revenue, I'm sorry. This is to certify that the foregoing resolution was authorized by the Page County School Board during its regular session on Thursday, March 9th, 2020.
Make a motion, we approve the resolution for communities and school grant as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Painter, a second by Mr. Gubler to approve the resolution for the communities and school grant.
Ms. Bowser?
Yes.
Mr. Painter?
Yes.
Dr. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Buford?
Yes.
Ms. Thorne?
Yes.
Ms. Gordon?
Yes. Secret?
Resolution to the Page County Board of Supervisors requesting adjustment of the 2022-2023 school budget for fiscal year 2022 year-end funds. Whereas the fiscal year 2021-2022 school operating budget had an approved appropriation of local county funds of $10,389,932, and whereas the actual amount transferred to meet budgeted expenditures was $9,283,833.11, and whereas the actual amount transferred was $1,106,098.89 less than the budgeted amount, and whereas the fiscal year 2021-2022 school capital improvement budget had an approved appropriation of local county funds of $1 million, and whereas the actual amount transferred to meet budgeted expenditures was $949,883.60. And whereas the actual amount transferred was $50,116.40 less than the budgeted amount. And whereas the high school softball fields need lighting, and whereas the cost to install lights at both high school softball fields is $400,000, and whereas the football field and baseball field lights at Bulldog Field are in need of repairs, and whereas the cost to repair the football and baseball field lights is $73,655, and whereas the Board of Supervisors had previously appropriated $72,080 for a facility study, and whereas the facility study costs have been approved to be covered by a school division grant, and now therefore it be resolved that the Page County School Board respectfully requests the Page County Board of Supervisors to appropriate $401,575 of the fiscal year 2021-2022 year-end funds for capital improvement projects to the school division capital improvement budget, which would increase local appropriations. In this budget table, the total amount of local funding has been reduced by the $72,080, since that will be used out of a grant. This is to certify that the foregoing resolution was authorized by the Page County School Board during its regular session on Thursday, March 9th, 2023.
Make a motion that we approve the resolution for field lights as
A motion by Mr. Painter and a second by Ms. Alger to approve the resolution for field lights.
Mr. Painter?
Yes.
Dr. Painter?
Yes.
Mr. Buford?
Yes.
Ms. Bowser?
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Gordon?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I don't know if we always use a resolution before to write the next one. So I don't know how far back it goes, but adjustment is spelled wrong at the top of both of these.
Thank you.
I looked up if there's a word called adjustment, but it's not.
Thank you.
It's like, I'm gonna learn a new word.
Well, Thank you. I'll correct that.
Overnight field trips in China.
I only have one overnight field trip request this evening, and it's a general request, board members, that now that we are in the start of the spring season, that we have a general approval for any overnight field trips that may result as the success of the HSL events for our students and their region travel.
Make a motion that we approve any of these. So whatever field trips we need overnight.
Overnight field trips.
As needed.
That's needed.
We have a motion by Dr. Painter and second by Ms. Aldridge to approve the overnight field trips as needed.
Dr. Painter?
Yep.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Ms. Aldridge? Yes. Mr. Painter?
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Gordon?
Yes. Board member discussion? It's been a long one.
I make a motion we adjourn.
That's good. Well, not, no, that's premature. That's not right. Nothing to say. Someone always says something that's.
It's been a long night.
Well, I'd say appreciate all the cards that the kids sent to us.
It's a
And,
cool little corner bookmark.
it is. And we are on 3.5 hours of meeting today. So that's the kind of thing you do. Appreciate that. We were invited in for some of the elementary schools to do some reading. Really cool stuff. Mrs. Grimsley at Stanley, at Blue Ray Elementary, at Miss Owens, Miss Williams, Miss Good. And I got to use the lily bug thing that projects. That's really cool. I like that technology. And appreciate everybody with the community forum. I asked about a month ago for Mrs. Gordon and Dr. Fox to do that. Y'all got it done. We had 40-some people. I thought the meeting went real well. And I saw some eyes opening up. I saw tears because we talked about where we stand with students and their struggles. So thank you for that.
Thank you to everyone who came to the forum, and, you know, hopefully we have more people at the next one, and we can keep the conversation going.
Make a motion we adjourn.
I can.
Okay, now we have a motion by Dr. Painter and a second by Mr. Dubler to adjourn.
Mr. Painter?
Yes.
Dr. Painter?
Yes.
Ms. Aldridge?
Yeah.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Gordon?
Yes.